Hello, everybody. Big Bad Bernie here. Sometimes I just like to become anonymous in TF2. If you've played way too much TF2, like I have, you've probably accumulated a pretty large friends list and an even larger list of people who recognize you in game. Whether it's random players taunting me anytime they kill me, people following me around servers, or just a constant stream of in-game Steam messages, sometimes it can get kinda overwhelming. When I feel like disappearing, I often go offline on Steam and change my name to something random but totally generic. In this gameplay, you can see, I think I named myself JBR243 or something like that. I equip a gibbous or some other pedestrian headgear and then proceed to just play TF2 like any other foot soldier. If I've had a long day at work or just need to unwind, it's kinda nice to play TF2 as if I'm a 100-hour newbie or something. But why am I bringing this up? Well, for whatever reason, TF2 players seem to associate headgear with player skill. And since we seem to be hitting the new wave of free TF2 hacks, any shabbily dressed sniper who is hitting their shots draws the suspicions of everyone in the server. I recorded the first clips you're watching here a couple days ago in a random Barn Blitz server. I'm speeding up large parts of the gameplay and cutting out a bunch because honestly it's pretty garbage gameplay and nothing really worth posting. At the same time though, it was enough to get me a couple of kill streaks and apparently enough to convince a couple of people in the server that I was cheating. Now obviously I don't hack, and I can't help but laugh at the idea that this gameplay looks anything like a hack. However, I do run into a lot of players who seemingly can't tell the difference between a real hacker and a relatively skilled pub player. And I mean, when you get down to it, the majority of people accused of hacking aren't even top-level TF2 players. If I can get accused of hacking while playing Sniper, there are probably tons of legitimate players who will get accusations. Since there are just a ton of players who are way better than me at sniping. With this in mind, I think I'm actually pretty decent at spotting hackers myself. Around 90% of the time that I go, whoa, there's something off about that player, I later figure out that they were in fact hacking. Usually the hacker just gets progressively more blatant with their hacks over the course of the game, and that makes it a little easier to spot. Of course, it's possible that I miss a lot of hackers as well, but I feel like I'm getting pretty good at identifying them. So for the next couple of minutes, I thought I would share some of what I've learned about spotting hackers and the most common mistakes I see around hacking. So the first mistake I see a lot is that people look at a player and the person is getting a lot of kills and conclude that therefore they must be hacking. Whereas in reality, as you can see in that first clip, you don't even really need to be playing that well in order to get a high kill streak as Sniper. Kill streaks as Sniper are more about not dying than about having phenomenal aim or anything. If you play defensively and you know how to avoid dying, you can get a decent sized kill streak, without too much problem. I was probably only hitting 1 of 6 shots in that first clip, and yet I was almost at a 15 kill streak. If I was playing well in that server, it probably would have been much higher. So this leads into the second mistake I wanted to talk about. So the second mistake is comparing the suspected hacker against an average player instead of a highly skilled player. So this might sound a little weird and abstract, but let me break it down for you. When you run into a sniper who's wrecking the server and performing way better than your average player, one of two things is possible. It's possible that the player's a hacker and is cheating, but it's also possible that the player is just really good. As I previously mentioned, both a cheater and a phenomenal player can hit lots of headshots, so the number of kills they're getting doesn't really mean much. Comparing someone against your own skill level is also pointless. Just because you can't reach a 20 kill streak every other life doesn't mean that someone else can't. So don't compare this player against yourself or against an average player. What you should be doing is comparing that player who's a suspected hacker against the best snipers in the game. Right? If someone's capable of getting massive kill streaks, They could just be a really, really good player. So what you actually want to be doing is comparing them against those players. So this kind of leads into my next point. In order to know whether these scarily good players are hacking, you need to know how really good players actually play. If you don't know how the best snipers play, how can you tell the difference between one of them and a hacker? So it's obvious that if it's obvious that the guy in the server isn't playing like an average player, that alone doesn't really tell you much. Is he playing different than a competitive sniper at a very, very high level? If you haven't watched recordings of very high level snipers, you don't know how they play. And at the end of the day, I'm a pretty average sniper. But in a random public game, I can sometimes go on sprees where 90% of my shots are headshots. So does that, mean I'm hacking? I guess my point is just that in a game like TF2, it's not really that hard to snipe once you reach a certain level. Once your aim gets to a certain point, there's really nothing that makes the sniping hard. There's no bullet drop, there's no bullet travel time, or any other mechanics that make it hard to hit a person. All you need to do at the end of the day is just kind of click on somebody's head. And what that means in practice is that most shots are hittable, which conveniently leads me into the next mistake. Mistake number 3. This person hit a weird shot on me. That must mean they're hacking. So I'm including this mistake not because it's entirely wrong. I think there's a little bit of truth to it. But instead, I think it's that I'm including it because sometimes people draw too much from one instance. A sniper hitting one hard shot or a weird shot doesn't really mean much. I hit a lot of weird shots. I just don't hit them crazily consistently. So now that we know some of the mistakes people make, how do you spot a hacker? Well, number 1, don't look at the number of kills. Look at how the player is getting those kills. Good players are usually not just good aimers. The majority of the time, they also have decent game sense. They know where they should position themselves, and they know how to move around the map effectively. Good snipers, for instance, will often stutter step in between shots to make them harder to hit. They usually won't just run right out into the open, and they'll instead know all the good little peeking spots so that they can poke out, hit you with the headshot, and disappear. In contrast, hackers usually have really poor movement skills and game sense because they're relying on the hack to hit shots for them. They will also run right into the open and then just hit their shot anyway. So the second thing you can do to look for hackers, you should look at how they are aiming. So I try to look at just how they're moving their mouse around the screen. Aiming is a manual process that can take more or less time depending on the movement of the person you're trying to hit. I can aim at a stationary sniper almost immediately, but I usually take a bit more time tracking like a stutter-stepping player who's moving erratically. If the suspect aims immediately regardless of who they're aiming at and their movement pattern, that's kind of a red flag for me. Well-designed hacks can be subtle, but the average hacker you're going to run into isn't using their hacks subtly. So the next tip. Spectating can be really helpful, but only if you know what you're looking for. I look at the thought process of the player. Where they're going and whether their decisions look like that of an experienced player. I look at their aiming style. Spectating is a much better gauge of these things than trying to infer how they're playing from your own perspective. It isn't perfect, but it's way better than nothing. So the last thing I do is that I try to bait the hackers. So when I get killed by an enemy a couple of times that, sets off my little hacker alarm, I try to play around with them a bit. I will go a couple of lives where I don't even attempt to shoot them, but I'll instead just focus on moving as erratically as humanly possible. There are lots of little things you can do that should make even skilled players struggle to hit you. I usually try this before I spectate a player. Anyway, I know most of what I've talked about is related to snipers. The other class hackers usually gravitate to is heavy. And the most helpful tip I can give you for spotting hacking heavies is just to watch the amount of damage they do to you at range. A heavy who can aim, or just a skilled heavy in general, can shred you up close regardless of whether they're hacking or not, so that really doesn't tell you much. However, there is nothing a good heavy can do to kill you quickly at range, just because of the spread of the minigun and the damage fall-off inherent to the class. TF2 isn't a normal shooter where there's recoil that can be countered, so learning the damage you can expect to take from a heavy at different ranges will allow you to pick out the majority of the hacking heavies. What I've been talking about is really just the tip of the iceberg with regards to hacking. If you followed any Counter-Strike news, you might know that there are some really subtle hacks that are almost impossible to catch without a trained eye. It's definitely possible that there are some TF2 players using hacks like these, and you would never know. At the end of the day, though, I feel that what I've discussed should help you in 90% of the cases. The more you play TF2 and the more you watch high-level players, the easier it will get to pick out the hackers, and the less you will point your fingers at legitimate players. Until next time, guys, keep it creamy. Oh, and one last thing, guys, before I go. I know it's been requested by a couple of you that I make either an ambassador montage or a guide of some sort on the gun. That is underway. As I normally do, I've been fooling around with like different mouse pads and all that kind of sensitivities and whatnot. And so I've just been kind of gathering some clips in the last little bit. Because I haven't been playing competitively or anything in the last little bit, for a while there my ambi-aim just wasn't really where I wanted it to be, and it's still really a work in progress. Before I release a video on the Ambassador, I do want the clips to kind of hold up. I want them to be interesting, and I want you to be able to take something from them. So that's why that hasn't come out yet. I don't put enough effort into a lot of my videos, and then I regret it afterwards. So hopefully I will get some interesting clips, and something that I'll be proud to share with you. So stay tuned, and it'll be coming out at some point. Bye for now.